and welcome to City Bridge's Design Fellowship webinar. This is the first that we're having, so thank you so much for joining us. We are going to get started off by introducing ourselves. And I will kick us off. My name is Jihad Broussard. I am the Associate Director of Recruitment and Selection. And basically what that means is I have the wonderful pleasure of not only preparing and working with the incubation team, but doing a lot of work across all of our different design pathways, which is design studio, design fellowship, as well as design residency. And so if you all have any other like lingering questions that would come up maybe throughout or after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me. I will give you our contact information a little later. And I will kick it off to my colleague, Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan Grady-Serrano. I am the associate on the incubation team at City Bridge. So I do a lot of the logistics and operations support for Jihad with recruitment, but for also all three of our design pathways. And I will pass it off to Andrew.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Jihad. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm Andrew Pratt. I am a director of incubation here at City Bridge. My primary role is leading the design fellowship, and I have worked on this fellowship or program similar to it the whole time that I've been at City Bridge, which is about 5.5 years at this point. And my other responsibility is just showing up as a white guy in education, using whatever power and privilege has been inequitably bestowed upon me by society to fight for liberation and justice in the equity design work that we do together. So that is one of the driving thing that animates me in doing this program and this fellowship. So I'm excited to talk to you all about it.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And before we kick off, I just wanted to say, in addition to putting your names in the chat with your organization and school that you're representing, we also wanted you to know that you are more than welcome to use the Q&A feature. If there are any types of questions that come up throughout the presentation, we are going to also field questions at the end, but I'm also going to be lifting those questions up by you using the Q&A feature as well throughout the presentation. And I will kick it off to Andrew so that we can get started.
All right. Thanks, y'all. So I just want to state what is probably on a lot of folks' minds. We are still, and this was true when we started the fall fellowship, but we are still in the midst of a global pandemic that is disproportionately impacting Black and Brown communities here in DC and around the country. And that is happening within the context of a long, multi-century endemic pandemic of racism and violence against Black and Brown bodies. So we are operating schools and our school adjacent projects like in this COVID world. So I really just want to ground us in like the challenges of the moment. And so take a minute to think like what's top of mind for you or the team that you work with as you think about working with students next semester. And at this particular moment, one thing that's on my mind is just thinking about how long virtual learning may remain the reality for a lot of students, whether or not they're learning virtually or in person at the moment. So take a moment, pause and think like, what's a challenge that's top of mind for you or your team as you think about working with, as you think about learners next semester, even if you're not working with them right now. And put your thought in the chat, and I'll read some of those as they scroll by. Yeah, Rachel's saying finding ways to support families that are really struggling to get children to school. Yeah, that's real. Thanks, Rachel. Michelle's thinking about English language learners having sufficient access to social emotional learning and academic language through Zoom. Yeah, that's a big barrier to get through. Yeah, and Nicole's thinking about just engagement of students with educational difficulties. Yolanda, screen time. Yep, and Khazir's thinking about just engagement and energy. Yeah, Renee, building relationships. It's so hard. And I, even as an adult, I struggle with this. And so, yeah, Yolanda, all that extra screen time, I hear you, I hear you. So these are real challenges, and they are things that are a reality now. They are going to be our reality going forward. And so these are the kind of things that I want you to, these are kind of real things that we hope that people can lean into, explore, and figure out how to create new opportunities and new equitable solutions for in a program like the Design Fellowship. So this is something that a lot of folks have talked about for the past several months, but this pandemic is really bringing to the surface the savage inequities that were there all along. For many people, they were not beneath the surface. But what we do believe here at City Bridge is that everyone is an innovator, and everyone, given the right time and space and tools, can design solutions to the challenges that you and your communities see. And so we really would just want to stamp this idea that there are many great problem-solving tools that many of us use on a regular basis, but sometimes there are challenges that we believe deserve the application of an equity-centered human design toolkit. And that is really what fellowship is about. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean by that, but it is a set of practices that we think is necessary in order to redesign what happens in schools or design new pathways for a more equitable future. So there are 4 big challenge areas that we encourage folks to sort of group themselves or align with as you apply to fellowship. Those are mental health, social emotional learning, assessment, assessment of learning. How do you know what kids are learning given the strangenesses of virtual settings? How do you engage families? And then how do you support special populations, specifically English language learners and students with IEPs? And so Design Fellowship is wide open and does not necessarily preclude overlap or sort of an expansive reading of those different areas, but we do provide some follow-on supports after folks exit our fellowship that are sort of subject matter specific and connect. These are things that we have identified experts that we can help people design around. It also allows us within fellowship to help people collaborate and work across teams along common areas of challenge. So what is fellowship? Where does it fit into what we do as an incubator at City Bridge? So many of you are maybe familiar with Design Studio. It's something you've participated in or learned about. Those are a series of 2 or 3 introductory workshops. It's maybe 6 or 7 hours total worth of synchronous programming. Design Fellowship is our next stage beyond that. It is 4 months, monthly workshops with an emphasis on coaching and support in between, and a significant amount of design and piloting work that teams do in between those workshops, culminating in a pilot that teams leave the fellowship with and then execute in the time after the fellowship. So I'll talk about this a little bit more, but I just want to plant in your head the idea that we really focus on learning this equity-centered design toolkit, doing some smaller piloting and practicing within the fellowship, and then your capstone that you leave with is a big pilot, a big experiment, a big test that you have gone through this equity design process to develop. And we do provide some supports in the form of communities of practice to help you beyond the fellowship. Stage 3 is that design residency. It's for teams that are ready to really take that idea and go big. And so schools that exist now that might be ready to go undergo a really big transformation, or folks who've been working on scaling up an idea that they are ready to turn into a New Start charter school, or folks who've been scaling up an idea and are ready to turn it into a non-school venture that operates in partnerships with schools. And then our pre-launch year, that's sort of the 4th stage, particularly at the moment most associated with folks that are on the charter pathway. But what you should take from this sort of spectrum is that we really want to work with folks at different stages of their idea development. And even once you've gotten to the stage where you launch things, you don't leave us. We stay connected and we make sure that that launch is strong. So what is fellowship? It is an immersive program for 4 months that is focused on both supporting leaders in their teams, as well as giving you both access to and training on some customized tools and resources to build and scale these equity-centered solutions. We have partnered with DCPS strongly this year, and so the makeup of next semester's cohort is likely to be about 7 DCPS teams, and that gives us the flexibility under our current programming resources. Again, this is sort of the beta version of this fellowship that we've run in this semester, and then we're going to continue to be sort of in our own pilot mode next time around. 2 to 3 public charter school teams, or 1 non-school venture and 2 charter school teams in addition to the DCPS teams that we're working with. That won't always be the makeup of fellowship, but that's what we're looking at for next semester. So what do I mean when I keep referring to this equity-centered design toolkit? So the Equity by Design framework is a foundational toolkit and text that informs the work that we do across our entire incubation stages. And there are 5 big principles. Designing at the margins. So who amongst the stakeholders and students that are in your community are furthest from the center? Design for them, and you design things that are better for everyone, in addition to attending to those folks who have been most marginalized by racism, classism, ableism, sexism, all of the isms that plague us. The second principle is starting with yourself. So we believe that in order to design equitably, you've actually got to do the self-work of understanding who you are and in the skin that you're in, what biases you carry into design work. 3 and 4, seeding power, is about being clear about like who has the power to make decisions in a project that you're working on. So are you designing things and giving them to students? Are you co-designing with students and learners and families, and equally sort of wielding the pen when you're writing a new script? Or are you actually giving over the tools to someone else and saying like, look, I'm here to support you at this stage of the design journey while you make the decisions? And in addition, we have to make the invisible visible, so understand the power dynamics that are in play when we are leaders in schools or when we are teachers in schools, and who gets to make decisions. Speak the future, design the future is really about the language that we use. Are we using the language of kids dropping out of school, or are we using the language of kids being pushed out of school? Are we focused on urgency and assessment, or are we talking about feelings and liberation and the process necessary in order to get to change? So when we attend to the way we talk about it, we're attending to the way that we think about it, and we can alter, we can decolonize our minds as we're thinking about this work. Equity by Design is a toolkit developed by our former colleague, Caroline Hill, and her collaborators and conspirators, Michelle Molitor and Christine Ortiz. It is a labor of love that informs the work that they all still do in their respective organizations, often different corners of the country now. And the way that they boil this down to, and it is a pithy way to remember it, is that racism and inequity, they're products of design. People built the systems that oppress one another. And these systems and structures can be redesigned because they are products of human design. And so Equity by Design is a remix of both human-centered thinking, human-centered design thinking, and equity work that brings creativity and consciousness together. I encourage you to go and find the Equity by Design framework if you have not encountered it before, and read it for yourself. So what is it that as a leader you would get by participating in fellowship? So when I focus on this, separate, sort of to contrast it a little bit with Design Studio, if you were part of that, fellowship is about teams, and for teams have leaders, even if there is a sharing of responsibilities and power on those teams. So we talk about like what are the responsibilities and opportunities for team leads and the folks that they're working with. So it's really a place where like you can grow and transform the skills that you and your team have and focus them on an equity focused or an anti-bias project. And in addition, something that we have seen over the many, many years with our programs is that this is an opportunity for teacher leaders or folks who are ready to sort of advance to take that opportunity to get a project and grow in their leadership, practice those skills. And it helps people in many cases like feel more invested and more connected and more empowered in the work that they're doing at their schools. And that actually supports like their retention and their growth. In addition, I said there's a whole host of tools that we provide access to and share. And it's really a place to develop mindsets, to apply the, things that you may have developed the mindsets to make sure that you are always approaching this work with an anti-bias, anti-racist perspective. I'll talk a little bit more about what some of these products are, but we talk about using a tool called theories of change to articulate like what's going on in your school. It's actually something we actually spent a good chunk of today as an incubation team talking about the way that we teach this, because we believe it is such a powerful tool to pause and reflect and make the invisible visible by saying, what is it that is currently happening at our school or within our organization, so that we can be clear on what are the places where we want to add new things and pilot that or transform it or remake what is there and create something new. And that goes to this concept of looking at like what are the components of school and how do they fit together so that we can transform them in a more equitable way. So that leads to sort of like, what are the things that come out of fellowship? You produce a theory of change describing how your school or your organization operates. We do a lot of storytelling every single time we get together. And so you'll figure out what's the story that you need to tell as a team, as well as an individual in the skin that you're in, about like, why are you doing this? How do you show up? And how can other people join you? And what's the call to action to get them to be part of your coalition? Plan for that coalition, engage different stakeholders, because we believe that transformation and innovation in schools it requires people to be there and support it and to back it and make space for it and throw in their lot with your vision. And the other two things I would emphasize is there is a pilot that you build and execute between the second and third workshops within fellowship. And then there is the second sort of usually larger in scale pilot that takes you beyond fellowship. So those are really like big capstone projects. I'll pause for just a second. Are there a couple of things? Is there anything in the chat that I need to be paying attention to? Great. Cool. When we talk about those pilots, there is a whole process that we methodically walk teams through, and that you then gradually release and sort of are less methodical and less hand-holding the second time around. But it's really about like defining clearly what is it that you want to work on, and that comes from doing a lot of empathy work with students and other stakeholders, interviewing them, shadowing students, looking at different data points that might show up in surveys. Then doing a lot of planning, like the what, the how, the who, what's the project, how are we going to execute it, how are we going to measure and learn from it. And then we really encourage you, like, build things from scratch that you need, but borrow them if you don't. Take them from wherever, cobble them together. And then document, and learn from what you do. And this is cyclical. And part of what we hope and support folks in walking out of fellowship with is some really polished descriptions of what is your pilot, both so that we understand and can potentially further invest in that work as you move along, but also so that you can bring other people in and show them both the process and the product and why you're going in the direction that you want. What do we do in general, very high level at each workshop? Like I mentioned before, there's certain things that we do every single time we get together. And so we emphasize storytelling, like how do you show up not only in the skin that you're in, but like as an advocate for the work and the vision that you're developing. And how do you break down all these different tactical moves from the equity by design framework and analyze the information that's coming in, attend to the discourse, and then start defining your problem, building your theory of change, and merging that in with your pilot design. So what are the kinds of things that people have built based on this? I want to offer 3 quick examples that are that are fresh in my mind because we're working with teams right now. Hindley Elementary is a DCPS school in Ward 8. They are designing new structures or transforming. They're actually continuing a transformation they started tinkering with last year, but they're designing structures for 4th and 5th graders to really take over the bulk of the social emotional learning work within their school. And so instead of adults leading the community meetings that they have every month or every week, they are developing ways for students to become the leaders and to resolve conflicts amongst peers without adult intervention. And this is really exciting because it's actually based on what those kids in the school told the adults they wanted. They said, we don't want the adults talking to us, we want to do the talking. So they're building some really exciting structures to enable that to happen. Washington Yuying is a Chinese immersion elementary school, charter elementary here in DC. And they ran into this really interesting realization looking at their theory of change that their faculty had done all kinds of great high quality DEI training, but they didn't yet have the next stepping stone to translate that into instructional change and instructional improvement. And so they're building a toolkit that helps their elementary teachers figure out how do you really zero in and examine from a culturally responsive perspective, like what is going into your lessons, and then how do you improve your own instructional planning over time from that lens. And then a very different circumstances, very different example. Youth services and the Inspiring Youth Program are the partnership between DCPS and the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. And so they serve incarcerated youth, either in the short-term or long-term incarceration programs here in the city. And they are battling against really big challenges because of public health measures. They don't have access to their students. They're actually not able to teach in person. They're not actually able to offer virtual learning to those students either. So they are really trying to figure out how do they connect the work of multiple agencies that are serving those students to support their learning during this particular COVID moment. I'm on sort of the downhill, the last few slides. I know we're at or after 4:30, but sort of what is it that you'll do on a month-to-month basis? The fellowship, in addition to the workshops, which are at the moment they're full day. I'm going to try and figure out how to get those down a little bit because it's a lot of time on Zoom. But there's really probably 6 at least hours worth of work when you include like readings, meeting with your teams, meeting with a coach, applying some of these design skills per month in between workshops. For folks who are not the principals at their schools, this is also an important, like, this is something that needs sign off for the time and the resources, but you're also going to get the opportunity to join a like-minded community of 30 plus other folks who are all really interested in deeply understanding a student challenge and then figuring out how to evaluate and improve the conditions that will support that work at their own schools. And then, like I said before, that we offer multiple ways of running these tests to learn more about and scale up your solutions. So what are you going to get? You're going to get those 4 in-person virtual, sorry, oh man, I should have said 4 virtual one-day workshops, the individualized coaching. And I will emphasize again, I've said it a couple of times, that coaching and those workshops are both critical. The teams that really run the farthest invest in meeting and collaborating as a team and then with their coach outside of the workshops. There's that community, and we offer stipends of up to about $5,000. There's some technical parameters on that, but that is designed primarily for folks to access after the conclusion of fellowship in order to power your pilot. And the idea behind that money is that if it was not going to happen without those resources, we want to make sure that your pilot does happen and that nothing gets in the way. And like I mentioned, we do offer some communities of practice around those 4 topic areas that I showed you at the beginning of the slide deck to offer some lighter touch, but still expert focused monthly support beyond the fellowship as you are executing your second pilot. I will offer 2 final visualizations to underscore, like in the spring during fellowship, there is this cycle of pre-work, workshops, building and testing, and coaching. And then after the fellowship, so really summer, fall next year, starting to think pretty far ahead, you're implementing that pilot. If you're part of those targeted networks, that community of practice, you're learning and reflecting a couple hours a month and making adjustments. And then there's some light touch check-in from us. Just to emphasize, what does that first part look like on a month-to-month basis in fellowship? Your homework after each fellowship is really about running pilots, designing and building pilots, and meeting with your coach to hone and refine what you are working on, and then integrate that into your next workshop. This info is available on the website, but I'll put it here. Our application is open. Selection will happen at the beginning of December. There'll be onboarding emails and check-ins that happen with folks at the January after the holiday break. And then there is a 2-hour kickoff and community building that we'll run on Friday, January 15th to really have everyone connect and ground you in what is the work that you need to do in the month that runs up to workshop 1. So that January kickoff is short. It's a couple hours in the morning before we get into the cycle of workshops that will take the bulk of those days on in February, March, April, and May. Jihad, back over to you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone being here, and thanks for just giving me the opportunity to talk about this program that I am very passionate about.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrew and Megan. Honestly, wanted to just shout my team out first and foremost for kicking us off. And then secondly, just wanted to say, if you all do have any questions, feel free to lift those questions up now. I know that y'all are being a little shy, a little bashful, but feel free to shoot us any question that you may have, as well as I did drop our email in the chat box so that if you do have lingering questions that may come up, probably not today, but maybe sometime tonight, feel free to email those questions to us, and the questions will go to one of the team members and we will get your answers to you. Just wanted to reiterate that the application deadline is November the 27th. And if you got on today just to hear more about the design fellowship, or maybe you wanted to know more about design studio or design residency. However, today I will tell you that we're not going to talk about studio and residency, but what I can say to you is that studio and residency applications will be coming out sometime in December, so definitely be on the lookout for that. And if you have interest in those two pathways, feel free to go onto our website and submit an interest form, and that'll get us your contact information so that we can reach out to you. I do have one question that just was lifted up. We're going to answer this one live. How do you know if you should sign up for design studio versus design fellowship? That's a great question. And so I think that it's honestly a case-by-case basis, and that's the reason why we would love to have conversations with each individual applicant. So go ahead and shoot an email to the incubator@citybridge.org if you feel like you are trying to parse out which pathway should I apply to. Go ahead and email them, and we will set you up a time to speak with either myself or Andrew or one of the incubation team members. And please continue to keep those questions coming.
There's a couple in the chat, Jihad. Do you want?
Sure.
Ashley was asking, what does a successful applicant look like? Do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So one of the main things that we look for in a successful application is someone who has defined their problem. We really want you to really kind of have an idea on what you want to achieve. And the most successful teams are teams that have kind of probably tried to problem solve around this idea before. Maybe not done like a full scale pilot, but maybe you have done either have participated in our design studio and have run a smaller iteration of what a pilot is. And so maybe you've worked with a small group of students and kind of have identified whether or not you're trying to figure out whether it's a social emotional issue that you're trying to address. That's what we're looking for, is somebody who has already defined their problem and has made some type of effort to address what it is. Not at like a larger scale. That's what the work that we're going to be doing with you is really trying to figure out what should you exactly be targeting by using the framework that Andrew was mentioning, which is the theory of change. And then, sorry, I'm trying to scroll. Let me see. Thank you so much, Megan, for putting that application link in there. I'm a teacher, but I'm not working with my school and my program because I want to assume ownership of the program. I don't have a team. Do I need one? Yes, great question. So yes, for design fellowship, you do need to have a team prior to joining. And the reason why is because of the kind of the bouncing off of ideas and to be able to do the amount of work that you have that we're going to be throwing your way, you need to already have a team that's assembled prior to you joining this pathway specifically. So for design fellowship, that is a requirement. Design studio, you do not need to have a team.
And yeah, Rachel has a great question. So in the world where we are gathering people together to meet, the teams are somewhat constrained by like the budget of like the space that we can get and the lunches that we can provide, as well as just our bandwidth as coaches. So 3 people is the typical recommendation for a team. In a virtual world, it's a little easier for it to be 3 or 4 people. So I would really target like 3 or 4 folks on a team as we're looking at another virtual semester. In our experience, when teams get bigger than that, it is too many cooks in the kitchen, and it is too much collaboration to manage, and it's too many voices to really to narrow down the focus. So 3 or 4 people is what we would expect on a team.
Any more questions, folks? Can one of your team members be an actual parent? Great question. Andrew, do you want to take that one?
That would be super exciting. I think, yes, like there's no reason not to. What I would set as an expectation is there are team members, and then there are folks who collaborate with your team, right? And so if that person is able to commit to being at these long workshops and being a part of the coaching conversations and like being a full part of the work, that's awesome. That's amazing. And like that is exactly the kind of co-design that we would encourage folks to think expansively about. That should never preclude anyone who is an important part of like the community or the stakeholders from being an important collaborator. But when I say team member, these are sort of like, we're going to put your email in our spreadsheet. You're going to get lots of messages. We're going to add you to the Zoom meetings and sort of expect that those are the folks that we're communicating and collaborating with from a City Bridge perspective. So that's that is an exciting possibility and would take us into some new and awesome co-design territory. So thank you, Ashley.
And Andrew, please feel free to build onto this answer to this next question, because I think a gist of it. And the question is, can you talk more about what a non-school fellowship might look like? I'd love to say that as our process kind of evolves, one thing that we have enjoyed doing is making sure that we're meeting our fellowship participants where they're at. Right? This isn't something that is like going to be a full baked process. And I think that given that this is for someone who's doing a non-school fellowship, all of you probably are launching different types of problems. And so I think that the framework that Andrew showed you, that is what it's still going to be true for your process, but it's just going to look different. It's not going to technically be happening inside of a school, right? So, and Andrew, please feel free to build on.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Jihad. You would be, anyone participating as a non-school venture would be, you would be a path blazer with us, and we would get to co-design what that experience is, because here before this we have just worked with school teams, but we really want to figure out the right way to open this up to non-school partners, because we work with non-school partners in some of our other stages right now. We are not new to helping people start ventures. We are just new to this particular program. So what I would say in particular, Rachel, is the thing that I just think is most important is there is an emphasis on learning with stakeholders and specifically students. And so when you think about like some of the big components of the program, we ask people to do a lot of empathy work. Do you have access to students, learners that you can talk with, that you can shadow, that you can learn from? And then when it comes time to build and run pilots, do you have ready access to a community of students where you can say, all right, next week, we're going to try out this new thing, and that is something that you can sort of immediately pivot and work with kids and come back and report back on. So if you have access to kids in a way that is analogous to teachers and APs and deans in a school, then I think that's sort of you've got the foundations, and we can talk about the other aspects after looking at an application. So if those things are true, don't let that dissuade you from applying.
Any more questions? We'll stay on for about 2 more minutes. And like I said, if you do have a lingering question that may not come up right now, please feel free to reach out to us at incubator@citybridge.org. I will reshare that one more time just to make sure that you all have it. Another question just came in, Andrew, and the question is, have any of your previous projects been parent focused?
Yeah, Hazir, thank you for that. No, but that doesn't, the total universe of projects that we're talking about here is 20-ish. That doesn't mean, well, actually, that's not true. And this is new because there's a few teams that have pivoted just in the past couple of weeks to include, for instance, so sort of when schools regroup, term to term or unit to unit, virtual setting, like that presents a lot of challenges for kids getting to know one another and acclimating both students and parents to new teachers and new routines. So there is actually a middle school and I believe an elementary school that's in the program right now where they are thinking about that holistically. So what's the experience for students as well as what is the experience for engaging with parents? So that is one example that's pretty hot off the presses.
Alrighty, everyone. Well, as always, we really do appreciate you all for joining us, and thank you so much and for attending, as well as staying in the City Bridge family as well as ecosystem. Feel free to contact us if you have any more follow-up questions. And like I said, if you are still trying to figure out which pathway is for you, that is a question that we get all the time, and we would love to chat with you by way of phone, Zoom, or something of that nature. So don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for joining us again. Take care and enjoy the rest of your weekend, and happy holidays.
Thanks all. Bye.